This is the Real Wealth Podcast, where we explore all things wealth related. Join us on this wealth journey. Let's get into it. This week, I'm joined by Michael Donnelly, co-owner and managing director of Atkinson Donnelly Accounting Services. In this podcast, we are talking about all things entrepreneurship, all things financial education. We're talking about how to grow and scale a business, and we're talking about the importance of tax. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thank you.
Let's get straight into it. And the first question I've got for you is, are all accountants boring?
The stereotype that's haunted me forever. No, I think all accountants accept that we are seen as being boring, but having been to many accountancy conferences and nights out, etc., it's definitely not the case that we all are.
Yeah, I think it's that whole thing of the expectation that, you know, it draws in a certain type of person, draws in a personality type, but, you know, obviously my background's finance and accountancy as well, and, you know, I've met a lot of really cool people along my journey, and I'm always really interested in speaking to other people that understand finance in that sort of deep dive way, because it's just such an interesting subject, you know, and Mike Tara's has been a bit boring, but I don't think it is at all. So you are you managing director at AD+, you have your own business, you've got a really successful accounting practice. Tell us a bit about the business and what led you to being where you are right now.
Yeah, so the business has been going for over 30 years. I was always aware of the business because my dad started it, and that, I suppose, contributed to my interest in accountancy. I always enjoyed numbers, working with numbers, and that wouldn't surprise anybody. But like, I had the privilege of, during holidays particularly, I remember when in school I did a little bit in the office, work experience week and things like that. I would go in there just to get a taste of it, and then decided at the end of school I wanted to go into accountancy, so went through uni, and that was a game changer, having between the kind of years in uni, the 3 months or whatever that you're off, being able to get that practical experience, as well as the theory that you were learning. I felt really fortunate to get that, because it made me certain that I wanted to work in a practice environment, and that's not the case for everybody that does accounts.
I think that's massive, actually, because I go back to my own experiences, and, you know, studying accountants and finance at university, and I didn't really have, like, I struggled to find those work apprenticeships during the summer holidays and stuff like that. And I genuinely, when I started my first job, they handed me a pile of files and says, right, do the accounts for this company, and I'm like, fuck, what do I do here? You know, and I genuinely had to go through the previous year's accounts to try and figure, and it's bizarre that you can come out from an accounting and finance degree and not have that practical capabilities, but there's a massive difference in theory and application, and if you don't have, you know, that contrast of experience with it, it's just really hard to put it together.
No, absolutely. And I was fortunate I got to taste that and then work out, no, this is definitely what I want to do, because, you know, I went through the accountancy degree and loads of people thought they wanted to go into practice and then quickly worked out, oh no, I don't. And then actually, sadly, quite a few just dropped out completely and went a completely different road, where, you know, they might have actually, they might have wanted to be an accountant, but it could have been an industry, for example, or some finance team somewhere, but they got like a bad experience when they had to make that choice of what type of accountant were they going to be, and they hadn't had a flavour of it to work out where they would be suited.
I had a funny experience when I was first coming out of university, because I hadn't really solidified what type of accountant I wanted to be. So I was just kind of doing interviews at various different firms, and I went for an interview at Ernst & Young, and, you know, I remember going in, and they were, I think it was public tax auditing or something like that. It was something that I immediately knew as they were explaining the job, this isn't going to be for me. But he was asking me a lot of serious questions, a lot of current affairs, and whether I knew them, and whether I was reading my Financial Times, and you know, and I just wasn't there. I'd done terribly in that interview, but I came out of that interview, it was in Edinburgh, and I remember walking down the street in Edinburgh, and I passed this office, and it was the Association of Master Bakers. And I found it fucking hilarious. I was just laughing away all down the street, and I thought, there is no way I'm mature enough to get that job. That is gone.
I confirmed that.
But I did thankfully fall into a job with a company, so it was chartered management accountancy as opposed to, you know, being involved in the tax and the audit. I went down the management route, part of being a business and all, and it just attracted me so much more, because you're helping build a business, create something, your finance, but to support the growth of a business. And that to me was more interesting than auditing or taxation, where you're just checking the books and making sure that everything's up to speed, you know?
No, 100%. I was actually warned off going Big Four for that reason, that you would just be streamlined in, you know, even just oil and gas, for example, one particular industry, just auditing, pure audit in a sector. And that variety that you're alluding to that's missing from that is exactly why I love what we do. Because there's so many different businesses, and we deal with a lot of business owners, which we're going to get into across many sectors, and there are commonalities with those people, and commonalities in the challenges that they face, and we can help them overcome them and make a difference for their business. And I knew that it was important to choose a practice that was going to allow me that type of experience and get more of that experience. I didn't, after leaving uni, I didn't want to go into the family business. Like, it was just a big thing for me personally to deliberately go elsewhere. I went to Edinburgh and, you know, get the qualification. I wanted to do that in my own right, but was certain, having had the benefit during the kind of school breaks, uni breaks, of working in a small accountancy practice, that I would be better suited to that, and the kind of experience that would give me exposure to it, as opposed to going to one of the Big Four, as you mentioned there, when it's far more isolated in terms of the type of work that you get working.
Repetitive, you know, that is when it starts to get a bit more boring, right? I mean, I think the really interesting thing, and certainly my experience going through the accounting finance degree and then going into a job and helping build someone else's business for so long, I felt like I was quite financially intelligent, because I knew how to analyse a balance sheet and all that sort of stuff. But I went through my 20s, you know, really understanding nothing about my personal finances, the basics of how to build my own wealth, because I was just focused on a job, you know, it pays you every month. But if you're spending more than you're earning, if you're not building your asset column, then ultimately in the long term you're gonna be completely reliant on this job, and if the income switches off, you're done. You know, and that was for me. Even coming out of accounting and finance as a degree, I had very little concept or awareness of my own financial situation. Is that something that was different for you, given that you know your father was running a business? There was obviously a combination of accountancy and entrepreneurship going on, or was it, you know, a similar sort of thing you had to get to that level of maturity to understand?
No, I've been really lucky, not just with my dad, like in terms of the mentors I've had in my life. There's just been a lot of really successful people that I've been fortunate enough to be around, and I think that's important, just the influence that they've had on me. So I was fortunate in seeing what other people were doing, what was working, and I totally believe that there should be a lot more done to educate people financially. I suppose, again, I was just fortunate that my circumstances were such that was happening without me even knowing that it was happening. So I always felt fairly capable in managing my own finances, and that will just be as a result of the influences that I had, rather than any structured education.
I mean, we always talk about that whole network equals net worth, you know, just having the right people around you to give the right advice. And, you know, Laurie and I both going to the same school, grew up in the same area. There really wasn't any entrepreneurs or people running their own business. It wasn't something we were introduced to till much later in life, you know, and you wonder if you'd had those lessons much earlier, what you'd have been able to deal with them, you know. So obviously AD Plus now, you know, you talked about it being a relatively small practice your dad was running. You eventually went into the family business, and it seems to be a bit of a different animal now. It seems to be, you're dealing with a lot of different clients. It seems like a pretty big practice now. So what's been the change, what's the drive, and what's the kind of goal?
It's been massively positive what's happened. So I went into the business 9 years ago, having got the qualification, as I mentioned earlier, and interestingly I said that I didn't want to go in, and it was never the master plan was I was definitely going to end up there. I just knew at the start I didn't want to go in there. And then what happened was, after I got the CA qualification, I fancied trying something out with practice to see how I found that, and I went to Lloyd's Banking Group and worked in the finance team there in Edinburgh. And honest to God, like I felt as if every passing, you know, week, month, I was just losing more of what I had learned. I wasn't applying it. It was very much on working day one, send that report to North America, on working day two, do that, and then the next month the same. There was totally totally repetitive, lacking in variety, all the things that I've already mentioned that I enjoy. And what I very quickly realised was I need to get back into practice, because the longer I stay out, the harder it's going to be to go back in and be effective. So I was there for 1.5 years at maximum, maybe just between a year and a half. And I made the decision that I'm going to go back and practice. Shared that with my dad, and he was like, well, you've known that I've always wanted you to come in. And at that point my mindset was, well, I don't want to look back and regret not trying that. I'm sure I want to go back into practice, so let's do this. So that was 9 years ago, and I worked alongside him for 4 or 5 years, or 4 years it would have been. And during that period it was difficult, you're working with family. That it was a kind of, obviously, a succession plan in place with no firm targets or deadlines on when my dad was going to exit, but just that was clearly the end game. And I learned a lot in that period, more than, you didn't feel like you were always learning, but I was. And what happened at the time was we were kind of locking horns a bit on certain changes I wanted to bring in, and just differences of opinion, and people looking to modernise the practice in certain ways. And not that he was opposed to that. Clearly we'd understand that businesses evolve, you need to do that, you can't stand still. But it was just some things that there was tension around.
It's hard to let go of your baby, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the practice had been going over 20 years by that point, and successfully. So my dad made it known he was going to sell, and then myself, my business partner Jeff, who we completed the buyout 5 years ago. In that period we've almost doubled the practice. It's been massively positive, and there's a lot of things that fed into that. It's not just one thing, but you kindly say that you've noticed that there's a difference to it, and we would all agree that there is. What's not changed is the ethos of the business. The ethos has always been about helping the client.
Yeah. And
that's one of the biggest learnings my dad gave me. It's just about helping businesses, helping the people behind the businesses, because one thing I find myself saying all the time, you don't want somebody to be working for the business, you want it to be working for them. And a lot of the time we'll see people that struggle with that, and it can end up you don't have a business, you just get the worst job in the world. So that's something that we're well placed to help people with, and we're massively driven to help people with. So making a real difference is what we're all about, and we've definitely been applying that, which has led to a lot of client referrals, and that's really where our business has grown from. It's not been an acquisition, or it's been totally organic, and it's just been from doing the right things daily. And as a consequence of that, it's snowballed, and we've had more and more introductions and capitalised on.
So
those
a lot of the growth has been just that purely organic, based on reputation and growing.
It's only been that.
Yeah.
Like seriously, I mean, I had an opportunity to buy another practice recently, and we looked at it, but then ultimately didn't want to go through with it because of the logistics, and I didn't want to do anything that was going to be detrimental to the core practice. Yeah. So that made that decision not to. Wouldn't rule out that route for further expansion if it was the right opportunity. Our building, we've got room to expand the team within the building as well. But it's been purely organic, and it is a great source of pride because it's just reflective of the work that we're doing for all our clients.
And it's also, I mean, the whole staffing thing is always the critical thing to get right, because one bad member of staff can put multiple businesses off.
Yeah.
And how have you found that in staffing and putting responsibility on the people? And you end up dealing with quite a lot of young accountants as well, coming through the ranks, making sure they're getting the right education and making sure that they're getting that client focus that you're so focused on. Yeah,
that's really important. I tell clients all the time that every small business is dependent on its people and its systems. It's an expression I find myself using regularly, and we are no different. So the modernisation I mentioned was the introduction of better automation and other systems and processes and ways of working. That's been huge. The young people you mentioned are really important in that regard, because they are more capable technologically than I am, and there'll be people that will come after them that'll be even more so, and it's just natural. So we've got a lot of young trainees, which is obviously part of the course in an accountancy practice. One big thing that I've reintroduced that's helped with the quality is putting people through ICAS, like the Chartered Accountancy training. We weren't doing that as a firm before I joined the firm, and it was a big thing for me because somebody made the investment in me and gave me that chance to go to the institute and get my chartered accountancy qualification, and I want to give other people that route. So doing that was important, I think, because you get a good calibre of trainee going through that and coming out of it successfully. Some of the people that have worked on your accounts that have done that, and they're impressive and they're effective in what they do. So we've done that, but we've recruited. Have we got them all right? No business does. And you mentioned the difficulty of people within the team. So we're not unlike any other business in that we've had instances where there are people that have been in the team that haven't been ideal, and we've had to deal with that, just the way that you do need to deal with
Absolutely,
that. Depending on having the right team.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a big journey for us as well, taking on employees and getting the right people in the right roles, and going through a bit of turnover and making those difficult decisions when it's just not working. So it's definitely part of the journey. I think for me the really interesting thing about your business, you get to see a variety of businesses and how they're performing, and the people that run them, and the strategies that they're using, and the interesting part about that is having to dot between companies as well, and understand the business model from a macro view, but also being able to support them. There's a lot of, you're exposed to a lot of different things in that industry, and it must be really interesting. You're dealing with a lot of different entrepreneurs. Is there any sort of commonality you see with successful business owners and entrepreneurs? Is there any character traits that they have that you kind of feel like, that's it, they've got something?
Yeah, no, there are, and you're right. It's really diverse, the types of businesses that we deal with, and that is so interesting. You get a lot of learnings dealing with people, and again, that's something I feel fortunate to be in that position. But there's no doubt that there are commonalities in the traits of successful people. One of the most fundamental things is being willing to work hard and committed, and going the distance, and not stopping when there's a setback. Like, every day has setbacks. A lot of the time, some people will just then not get back up and go again, or they'll be rattled by it more than they should be, because it's going to happen. You're going to have those downs. So I've noticed that people are willing to go to whatever extreme it takes to get the result ultimately and make it work. That's something that's definitely been noticed. Other than that, it's really a mindset and a belief that you're going to succeed. There's loads of things that feed into that. But if I was to try and sum it up, it's just that mindset.
I mean, mindset is massive, and it comes up time and time again when we're talking about things. In the first podcast I've done with Laurie, he's our mindset guy. He talks a lot about it. A lot of the books that helped him at the start, like the Chimp Paradox by Professor Stephen Peters, talk about atomic habits. There's a lot of books that help you with mindset, but the reality is, if you don't get your head right first, if you don't get you right first, going through this business journey, it's going to be really tough for anybody, because it's never going to be a walk in the park. It's never going to be as simple as you think it's going to be. And if you knew all of the challenges you were going to come up with throughout the journey, you probably wouldn't start. So it's best to start from ignorance, but work on yourself as you go, so you're able to cope and adapt in situations and deal with things. I think for me, the big thing about an entrepreneur is they have to love the process of problem solving, because in anything you do, you're gonna be confronted with many problems along the way, and you have to enjoy the process of solving it. If you see every problem as a burden, as the world's out to get you, as in that sort of victim mentality, you're not going anywhere fast.
Absolutely. It's just having the self-belief and the confidence to know that whatever comes up, you're going to deal with it. You might not know exactly how at the time, but you will come through it. And then it just becomes a beautiful success, brings more confidence brings more success, and it's just that cycle of it. And I see that regularly with the clients.
So is there any businesses you would say just now that are really booming, any sectors, any areas? Obviously we're entering into a difficult time economically. Inflation's massively high, interest rates have started to rise to counter that. We're seeing the effects of COVID and all the money printing that went on there. leading to that massive inflation. We're seeing the effects of Brexit and the fact that we've lost a lot of that workforce that we had there that's now, gradually being replaced from elsewhere within the world. There's a lot of factors. There's Ukrainian war driving up energy prices. The world is a very uncertain place just now, and as a result of that, the economy is quite unsettled. So, is there any businesses that even through all that you can see they're doing well and they're succeeding in?
I wouldn't pick out a sector as such that can spring to mind as flying at the moment. What I would say, and is, I suppose, circling back to where we just were, like even within the industries that are affected adversely with what's going on and what's been going on in the world, like there are businesses within those sectors that are most hard hit that I still see succeeding and overcoming it.
Yeah.
And yes, they've got more challenging trading conditions and more external influences that are making things more difficult for them than it ordinarily would be, but they still find a way to come through that. And let's say the margin drops, it's not by any material movement that would significantly change their business or their life. So that's something that I find interesting, that even when times are tough, and it's not all completely within your control, the people that do best focus on what they can control and don't focus on what they can't and get distracted by, but it's tough out there, it's this and that. Just focus on what can we do and what action do we need to take to continue to prosper. And that's probably something else that I would say is common amongst the most successful entrepreneurs that we see. They don't worry about what the competition are doing or what the government might or might not do. They worry about what they can influence,
what they can control, focus on themselves, making their business better, making what they do better, and getting more efficient at what you do.
Definitely. Too many people look for a reason for something not to be working, and it's because of this, it's because they explain it away, and I suppose make excuses, and instead of actually just taking action and focusing on what you can do.
I mean, it almost seems so overdone in a lot of things that you listen to about the whole aspects of mindset and how you approach things, but I think it just proves time and time again that it is so fundamentally critical. The amount of people that we see come through our training course who go on to do really well because they've set the foundation right. It's great to see, but equally you have people who come through and come out the other end and do absolutely nothing, and it's easy to turn back and blame the education, but you have people doing really well out of it. It's all about how you apply it, how you get over those mindset hurdles, and how you move it forward. So I think that's a really good summary of it. Just to end this whole entrepreneurship thing, so is there any advice that you give to someone who's starting out a business right now? So
it's getting it right rather than getting it rushed. Don't be in too much of a hurry. The people that end up, you were saying about financial education earlier, the people that I see end up in bother is that they make it and take it guys. They might start off as going well and they're ripping all the money out of the company, for example, and then end up with an issue when something goes wrong, there's a cash flow shortage or there's a problem with a director's loan account or something like that. So it's being patient enough to know that it's not a sprint, and build something, and continuing to invest in yourself and your business. Investing in your education is massive as far as I'm concerned, to improve yourself in whatever field that you've entered into. So that would be important, to not think that where you're at today is going to be good enough. You have to keep improving, work on yourself, and then that leadership that you have within your business inspires the team that you have. The business will reflect the leadership. So you have to be continually working on improving yourself to expect your team to continue to improve. Really believe that. So having that understanding at the start that you need to get better as well, and then being ready for the setbacks and not overreacting to that. Again, not to be too repetitive, but focusing on the right things, not overthinking every little bit of a business. For example, outsource to a good accountant, outsource to a good whatever it might be, web developer, if you want to get a good website. Don't try and do things yourself that you're not actually skilled enough to do as well as they should be done, and believe that you're going to get there. And if you the reason that's important is it frees you up to focus on the bit that you are good at and you can excel within, and you get that team around you, and then just keep going, really. And if there's aspects that aren't working well, then address them, deal with them, and move forward. Don't be put off by the fact that there's going to be setbacks, because there will be, and don't be in too much of a hurry. That's really important, I think, for people that are starting out. We do help companies set up regularly and get started, and people go into things with big ambitions, big dreams, and then they might find that something goes wrong and be put off, but that's going to happen. Just keep going. Yeah,
it's coming. It's overcoming that first level of fear and taking the right moves. And again, when things start to go a bit challenging, a lot of people bury their head in the sand rather than face it straight on, deal with the issue and move on. And I know I've found in our business, anytime there's an issue, Laurie and I'll sit down, we'll deal with it head on. And then the feeling of relief you have, not that the issue is resolved, that you've agreed on the way forward, you know the right actions that you need to take, and you've dealt with it. It's not just lingering, you know. And you see people too often that have, you know, we had the opportunity to buy this building company last year to grow our existing construction business. The guy had just left it too late, you know. He buried his head in the sand. Literally the administrators were going to be in the next again week, and we couldn't help him. It was too late, and there might have been something to salvage there. We just didn't have time to do anything on it because he hadn't dealt with it at the front end.
No, you see that regularly. People procrastinate over issues, and that could be a member of staff that isn't the right fit, but you know, they might get better and not actually want to deal with that difficult situation. So I think that is important to address things at the right time and not procrastinate over that. The other thing I would say to anybody starting out is you have to accept that you have to sacrifice, you have to work really hard and work really long hours, and know that you there's a difference between working really long hours and standing still and, you know, busy full type territory. But if you're working hard and you're focusing on the right things, you can see they're going in the right direction, then that inspires you, in my experience, and I see other people to keep going and keep pushing forward. But it's accepting that there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with being entrepreneurial. It's not you know, somebody sells their business for £10 million and you know, lucky for him, or, you know, as if he's some kind of overnight success. There's a building process to get to that point.
Not just building the business, but building the individual, you know, building yourself to get to the point where you can build a £10 million company. You know, that takes a huge amount of work, you know? And it's the idea of working hard not to have to work hard. So put in the work now for the benefit further down the line, or have a nice comfortable life right now and accept that you're going to be working into your 80s by the time you can realistically afford to draw a pension, you know.
No, that's absolutely right. I think people sometimes have an expectation, want too much too soon, and that's what I was getting at earlier, where there's a requirement for patience and knowing that it's not a sprint. You have to work really hard. And I regularly have people say to me, you know, I seen you this, I seen you that. I'm going to make it up, you know, I seen you were in New York last week, but they don't see you in the office at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. You know, and it just takes an extraordinary effort to get to a place where you can sell a business for 10 million, for example.
I think I'm always really impressed by some entrepreneurs that seem to be everywhere. They're doing podcasts, they're building businesses, they're involved in 20 different businesses, and they've got all this shit going on. It's just like, how do you find the time in the day to make all this stuff happen, you know? And I read a book by Rob Moore, another big property guy, about life leverage. You know, it builds on a lot of different books that kind of feed into it, but just how you can rationalise all the things in your life to understand what's truly adding value, what's taking you forward to the next level, and the stuff in your life that really could be cut out. You could eliminate things, delegate things, outsource things. The amount of things that, you know, can be created, like doing this podcast, for example, where you can outsource the video editing, you can outsource the social media content, you can outsource it to a point where you're just there creating content and someone else is dealing with all the stuff in the background, you know. So you can be perceived to be everywhere, doing everything, but if you're systemizing the way you do it, you're leveraging all the things that are available to you, you can achieve a huge amount more in the standard working week that a normal person would be able to.
Definitely, it's working smart. And as we said earlier, people and systems, for you to have various business interests, for example, you're going to have the right people operate within those businesses. So it's always critical to the right who. I've seen that work massively effectively for people. I've also seen it go really badly. You know, clients that have maybe got an amazing core business, core trading business, and they diversify into something else, invest in somebody else, and then if that person isn't as committed or up to it the way that they should be, then that can go wrong, and it drags that person across into that, and then they're having to spend more time there, which wasn't the idea in the first place. So I think having the right people really, really important. to be able to do things on scale. And also, as you quite rightly say, the systems have to be there.
Systems and processes, absolutely massive, and we talk about that in our property investment training, where the key thing is to get your foundations right. Pick your structure, how you're going to structure your business, whether it's to a company or whatever. Get your mindset right. The second stage is to get systemization, get your systems in place, your power teams, all the people you're going to use, from your accountants to letting agents to refurb teams, so everything can happen fairly automated. So you can focus on the key things as a property investor, which are finding deals, finding money, and putting them together. So systemization's massive there. So we talked about, we mentioned a little bit about the whole education thing, and the fact that the education system really just doesn't support base understanding of financial intelligence, how to grow financial wealth. I mentioned this on one of the other podcasts. My partner's son is now picking his subjects for what was standard grade when I was at school, and the choices are broadly the same as they were when I was at school. They've added a couple of things like cyber security, salon services, health and beauty, which was a strange one on me as well. But of all the things, the way that the world is developing, to have added cyber security just seems really odd to me. It's like the least interesting part of human development on technology. The education system is not keeping up with the reality of the world as it is just now. We talk about, I don't know if you've heard about this chat GPT thing, which is this new AI software where you can basically go on, prompt it and say, write me a 300-word essay summarising the main points on a book, for example, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and within seconds it will create this unique piece of content that structures exactly, has interpreted your request and has pulled from all the information it has available on the internet and created a unique piece of content for you. So kids are never going to have to do essays or schoolwork ever again. It's there, and we're still teaching them the skills of learning things and regurgitating it like it's going to help them in life, when the reality is it's not. The world is moving on so quickly. And one of the big things for me that the education system lacks is a fundamental knowledge on tax, right? And it's particularly dangerous in the UK because as an employee, you're on a PAYE system. You get taxed before you even know you've made the money. The only reason you know you made a certain amount of money is because it's on a payslip somewhere. So you can go through your entire life with no understanding of tax. You can end up spending huge amounts of tax. In fact, there's someone much smarter than I am that calculated somewhere in the region of 60 pence to 70 pence in every pound that you make ends up in some form of tax, whether it's through PAYE and the deductions that you get there, or all the various other types of stealth tax. So you talk about, you get your salary, you get taxed on that, you get the money, then you start to spend it, you buy a car, well, there's VAT on that, and then you need to insure it, which is like another form of tax because it's obligatory, and then you buy yourself a house and you're paying interest on that, you're paying tax on the acquisition of that asset, whether it's LBTT, ADS, all those sort of things that you get taxed on, and again you need to insure that, then you start spending money, general goods and services have VAT on it, and you just go through life with all these additional taxes, and then you get to the end of life and you've got inheritance tax and they'll take 40% off it and you're totally fucked. So, it's a pretty bleak view. Some people talk about tax as a form of theft because it's just everywhere, when you realise the extent of it. So I guess for you, is there any level of tax understanding that you try to give your clients, or is it a case of we take control of that situation? Do you have to give them a base level understanding of tax so they don't do anything stupid like spend all the PAYE money or spend all the VAT money and they've got nothing left to pay at the end of the quarter?
No, absolutely, and that's fundamentally important that people provide for their tax. So if it's a business owner, make sure that when the PAYE is the same date every month, make sure the money's there for it. Don't be looking at your bank thinking you've got X when you haven't accounted for, well, what about the VAT that we're accruing? What about the corporation tax that we hope we're paying because that means we're profitable? What about the PAYE? And these things, it's amazing how often you see people that are actually successful in building a business in whatever field, but they don't know that that's going to happen, and particularly if they're starting out, you don't know what you don't know. So I see it as our responsibility to educate our clients to ensure that they are aware that tax is going to be payable across various type of taxes, and that they are ready for that and have the money set aside for it. Clearly a big thing we do, as you know, is interfere and mitigate on what those liabilities are where we can. So we get involved in that. So that we would say, look, leave that to us in terms of proactively putting forward, you can do this, you can do that. Don't worry about trying to come up with some wacky ways that you can reduce your own tax bill. Just do everything right, and then we'll explain what you can do. That's important. For example, I've often, a lot of new accounts that we've won, I've often seen what I consider to be flawed thinking of trying to bring the corporation tax down, through spending ahead of the year end, those kind of things. Now that can be the right thing to do in circumstances, but it can also be, if you suppress the profitability down too much to try and avoid corporation tax, it can interfere with the money that's been drawn out of the company personally, leading to a overdrawn director's loan account problem that can then have personal tax implications. So there's a kind of school of what I try and promote is do everything right, allow us to then be clever in what we can put to you on how you can legally reduce your tax liability, and people rely on us for that. But fundamentally, before you even get there, making sure there's an awareness of cash flow having to be available to meet those liabilities as they fall due. Because if people fall behind on tax, nobody likes paying it. But if you've got the money there set aside for it, it's far more palatable than if you don't. And if you fall behind, it can snowball and snowball and snowball, and then it gets very quickly and it gets very ugly. So that's just the financial discipline to understand that as an individual or as a business owner, you're going to have to pay tax. So let's structure things in the right way to make sure that we're mitigating it where we can, and that you're ready for it and you've got the money set aside.
Yeah. Do you think there could be more done at an earlier stage to teach people a general understanding of tax? I mean, given the fact that if you talk about 60-70% in reality of every pound that you make, 2/3 of the time you're working for the government, and most people don't even understand where it's going and what it's doing. Do you think there's more that we could do earlier on in people's education journey to understand tax? And if so, how could we do that?
I think yes would be the answer to that, but I think educating people on financial discipline in general, not even just exclusively on tax. That's what I think would be the way to go on it. Just explaining to you whether it's saving for your school holidays, saving for your summer holidays, understanding the principles around what has to be done, the discipline that has to be done to do that, the same as tax. So it's just understanding that you have to manage your money. You can't. I remember being, when I was a kid, at the supermarket with my mum, and she was just doing the weekly shop, and we got to the till, and I'd seen the receipt, and I seen the total, and I was like, that can't be right. Like that stuff can't have cost that much. And she was like, no, I've thought that before, but I checked it. I counted it up once. It is right. And people don't realise how much money can just disappear. Just living your life, which is the point you're making. So it requires actually setting a goal of how do you want to spend your money, and then divvying that up and working out how you're going to do that. And I think you don't get any of that in school.
It's so funny to see how unrealistic people are when they create their budget. So you say, okay, well, show me your budget for the month, and they'll say, right, here's my outgoings. It's like, well, okay, so you don't go out for dinner? Oh yeah, I go out for dinner. And then there's another 300 quid on the total. You're not planning on going on holiday this year? It's like, well, that needs to be spread over a monthly cost. What about birthdays and Christmases and all the other sort of things that are one-time thing, but you need to think about it throughout the course of the year. And they may say they've got 20% of their salary left at the end of the month, but in reality, when you pile all that other stuff on, they're actually 110% of their salary, and that's explaining why they're getting loads of credit card debt at the end of the year.
The stats on debt are scary. The number of people that are in debt. So it's a definite issue. And again, that snowballs. You're getting interest. The compound interest effect can work for you or against you.
Absolutely.
So no, I definitely think there could be more done. It would be difficult to do it exclusively on tax within school, but I think kind of making it a bit more just around financial management and managing money. And tax is one of those outgoings that you have to budget for.
There's one aspect of tax where it's quite challenging to do much with when you're an employee and you're in the PAYE system, versus when you're a business owner and you're creating wealth and you've got companies and companies were originally designed to protect against loss. That's where they originally came from. So, they're designed to protect from loss, they're designed to protect from tax. You can be very tax efficient when you've got a company. There's probably not much you can do. Is there any sort of tax advice that you've got for the average person that they can maybe avoid a bit of tax here or there?
No, I was going to make that point as well, that people that are on PAYE like schemes, which is most people, most of the population, they can't really do a lot about it. It's what's your salary, what's the tax rate applied, what you're netting. There isn't an ability to avoid it, and like you say, you're going to go and get a car, there's VAT on it, but what are they going to do about that? They have to just suffer it, and they won't even realise it. Most people, it's just part of the cost. But you're right, there's hidden taxes and everything. Going buy a bottle of beer, it's there. So what can people do that are in that position? Not a lot. What I would say to anybody that's going to be listening to this, that would act as a source of encouragement to be entrepreneurial, to try and take control. I said earlier on, the people that do best, they take control of their own circumstances, they focus in on what they are trying to achieve, and then they make that happen.
Yeah.
So if people were actually driven to change their tax situation, they would change their situation full stop and go a different road that was going to give that ability for control. And the reality is that most people don't care enough to do that.
Yep.
Most people put more planning into their summer holiday than what their tax bill is going to be, and that's even people that are self-employed that have got tax to consider. Self-employed people that have got a self-assessment tax return to do annually, and we commonly see we're in February last month again. Despite how hard you try to get people to give you that information early, it's just deferred. The lion's share of returns will be done in January in every accountancy office in the UK, and we're really proactive in trying to do things after, because it makes a huge difference to the taxpayer knowing what that liability is as soon as they can, so they can budget for that. And
not a few days before it's due to be paid.
Exactly, and the point I'm making just now is it's fascinating, but most people don't think like you and I. Most people don't care enough to. They understand that, it would be quite good to know that 6 months before it's due, but won't take the corrective action the next year. So year on year, it'll just suffer knowing last minute. It's interesting. So I think people that are in employed positions don't really have a lot of ability to mitigate their tax. Obviously, things like ISAs and making personal pension contributions to bring tax down, they are potential routes to do that, but again, most wouldn't. It's really business owners are who we deal with, and what we help business owners do is have an awareness of their tax and actively undertake action that's going to help mitigate that. And that's who we deal with, and there are definitely tips we can give those people.
Let's talk a little bit about your own wealth journey. Obviously, you're building a business. That's a big part of it. Are there any other strategies that you're involved in terms of wealth development? Are you investing in any other types of commodities or anything like that?
Yeah, I think diversification is one thing that I do myself and do strive to continue to do, because I think it's just intelligent to do that, to not only do one thing. I have different investments. The biggest thing is the core trading business, and I see that as well regularly, where people can take the eye off the ball in the core trading business because they're getting distracted by that investment, and that's not good. That the golden goose is the thing that the core trading business that can then allow for those investments to happen. And we can structure things in a clever way to maximise the ability to utilise what's generated in the core business tax efficiently to make alternative investments. Me personally, I've got a business that's successful and profitable, and that's been the gateway to other investments. So I invest in property. I've got residential and commercial property, and I have hammered my pension as well to the extent I've been able, because again I believe in diversifying. So I'm not all in on property. I've got property, but I've also got pension contributions that I've made, and I've utilised that to help with property as well. But I believe that you should look for other investments, whether that's other businesses. Again, it would just have to be done in the right way, so it's not going to be detrimental to what you're doing and what's working. one thing I'm going to be doing shortly, I think, is investing in whiskey, believe it or not.
Oh, nice.
A client
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I've got a client that's opened a distillery and looking to buy a cask from them. Somebody spoke to me about that on Friday. So that kind of thing, you know, I do, or I will be doing that one, for example. And yeah, the people that have been most impressive that I've been lucky enough to work with or observe haven't been all in one thing.
Yeah.
You know, so you can take my dad, I mentioned him earlier, out of the accountancy practice, he spun out a financial services company and sold that as well a couple of years, 2-3 years after he sold the accountancy practice. That was built on the synergy with the accountancy practice and being able to feed leads into that from the core business, so it worked and complemented what he was already doing, and that was really powerful. So both of the businesses were kind of growing together.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, and it resulted in him being able to sell not one business but two. Yeah. So I think it's definitely intelligent to look out with only what you're doing and look to make other investments, but not just, sometimes see clients just looking at anything. You know, they go on an acquisition course and I want to buy this business over in Northern Ireland that's doing something completely different to anything I've ever done before, just because I've learned how you should buy a company.
Yeah.
And there's danger in that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a bit of that. I mean, we were on a bit of an acquisition hunt last year, and it's so important that you get something that is synergistic with your current group, with your core group, and the beautiful spot is when you can work on one business to the benefit of the other businesses, and that's where we kind of came with the training business, where we bring property investors. We've got the sourcing aspect of that, where we're finding deals that we trade on to our current training clients, and then we've got the building company that does refurbs for not only the stuff that we're buying into our portfolio, but also now for training clients. And you can work on one business to the benefit of those multiple businesses, and that's where you hit the really beautiful spot. But you know, we have, you know, made one or two investments that just weren't in that synergistic kind of mold, and they haven't been great investments. They just haven't really worked out. So you know, you can see where sticking to your core, even if it involves other businesses with slightly different dynamics, as long as it's synergistic. Yeah, you know, you're getting a more bang for your buck, so to speak. You know.
And I mentioned it earlier, but I think a big thing that I've always been taught, I suppose, and seen work as well, is investing in yourself, continually making yourself better. So, for example, people paying to go on the training with you. The reason I met Jeff was we went to an accountancy specialist business coach that we used to meet at East Midlands Airport, a hotel there 4 times a year for a quarterly meeting. And there'd be practices from London, which is where Jeff was, Manchester, Dublin, but all over the place, and we went down from Glasgow, and that was purely to learn what other people were doing, what was working. We would all go there and share even our numbers, but share like the goals we had and technology that was new and was working well, or things that weren't working. And that was just driven from a hunger to continually get better and invest in yourself. As I said earlier, as a leader of our business, I do that all the time. That's to benefit not only me, but our business, our team, our clients, not just stand still and accept where we are. So I think continuing to make investment in your own abilities is really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I could talk to you all day, Michael, but I think I'm going to go to the last question, which is the question we ask every guest, is what does real wealth mean to you?
So I seen that this question was going to get asked, and I think it's a really good question. For me, is the freedom of choice, really. So I have made investments, as I mentioned earlier. I work the way I work within my business to improve it and continue to grow it. Like, why do I do that? What do I really want? What's the end game? You know, what is the ultimate goal? And you ask most people that, they don't know, and that can change and evolve over time. So for me, sitting here just now answering that, it's really to get to a position where I've got the freedom to choose what I want to do. If I consider myself to be, you know, wealthy like that, that's you know, I'm as wealthy as I'm ever going to be. It would be the point where I can do what I want when I want, and that might be continuing to buy other businesses and grow them and push them on and sell them. Yeah. It might be ending up on the beach somewhere, you know, golf course somewhere, more likely. But it's that freedom. So it doesn't mean freedom of choice, like, so you're retired and that's definitely the end game, you're going to play golf every day, because I would get really bored of that, I think, certainly at this stage. Definitely. And I've watched other people that have got further on in the journey, and one person I can think of that's been a massive mentor to me, he sold his business for a lot of money when I was like late teens. He's always been a great influence in me. And he's still buying businesses, still operating businesses, still involved. That hunger to still do that, even though he doesn't really need to. And there's several people in my life that I've seen in that position, several clients in that position. So they're doing that because they want to do it. They've got the wealth that gives them the choice, and their choice is that they continue. Other people sail up, and they're just family people now, or whatever it might be, and they don't work ever again, and they're happy doing that. So I consider real wealth for me to be that ability to choose what I want to do.
You hear so many different entrepreneurs that have sold up their business, and for a lot of them it's the worst day in their life because they don't know what to do tomorrow. It's like that my life has been dedicated to this. What am I going to do next? Conversely, you've got people like Elon Musk. He sold his shares in PayPal for hundreds of millions virtually straight after, then took that money and reinvested it all in 3 companies, built SpaceX, built Tesla, built Solar City. He's got a bunch of other things now. I mean, those are the guys that really drive forward and create huge wealth because they're always looking for what's next. But it's not for everybody, so it's just a case of understanding. I've heard of people as well that go through cycles of retire, get back in the game, retire, get bored, get back in the game, and I'm really interested to see where Laurie and I land on that journey as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
All right, well, thanks a million for coming along. Real pleasure talking to you, Michael.
Thank you.
That's been the Real Wealth Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Alex Robertson. I hope you join us on this wealth journey.